Hello, hello, hello. Hi, everyone. What's up? Jane here. I'm just going to take a few seconds to just let everyone get in and get acquainted. Super excited to be doing this webinar and really excited to see you all there and commenting and stuff. Oh, hang on, I can hear myself in the background there. Yeah, thanks for your comments and being like excited and up for this mixing webinar. So let's see where we're at. We are live. So yeah, so my name is Jane, and I am the Jane Arnison, and I'm the product specialist for Atom Audio. And in addition to that, I'm also a producer and mixer, like all of you, I assume. And I work here in the studio in Berlin. I also work at other commercial studios and stuff like that. And in addition to that, I'm also an educator. I might even have some of my students on the line. I'm not quite sure, but shout outs to anyone from BIMM. Yeah, so I'm going to be taking you all through this 3-part webinar series where we're going to look into mixing and production in more detail. So today let's see where we are. Oh yeah, there's my email if you want to check it out. I have a reminder here to remind you all that we have a prize giveaway, which is pretty cool. It's the Brainworks BX console from Focusrite. Yeah, the SC plugin series. Yeah, that's really cool. I love that. I use the BX console all the time. It's amazing. So whoever gets that, you're lucky. Good on you. So Anna tells me that it's going to be raffled at the end, and the winners will let you know afterwards. So stay tuned for that. All right, so I've put together, it says 4 there, but there's actually 3 webinars that I'm going to be presenting over the summer and particularly over the next couple of weeks. Today, the first one is setups and workflows. Then next week, we're going to get into audio processing, EQ compression, and a bit of spatial processing and dimension stuff as well. And then we finish off the series with an in-depth look at arguably the most important aspect of a song. Don't tell the bass player that. Anyway, the vocal production and mixing, we're going to go really deep into things like vocal arrangement, lead vocal processing, mixing and balancing backing vocals and arrangement. So it should be a really good one to finish off. Getting started straight away, just to let you know what we're doing today. I've divided it into 3 kind of sections. First part, we're going to be talking, it's all about the brain. We're talking about the psychology of mixing, thinking about things like how is mixing different from producing. And then we're going to look at the stages of mixing just to really understand how professionals approach it. And you can check in with how you do it and see if you're doing the right thing intuitively, or if there's a few more tips that you can bring into your own mixing process. Then we're going to get into the first stage, which is the first kind of physical stage, which is setting up the mix. And we're going to talk today about gain staging and routing. Some people go, oh, boring, but I love talking about these topics. It's really important. And when I really understood gain staging and routing and signal flow, my mixing just got so much better. So this is a really important part, and I hope that you'll get a lot out of it. And then we're going to finish off by talking about, again, going to think about your brain again and how you approach a mix. And we're thinking about discovery and framing, which is another word for listening, critical listening, and understanding what you're mixing. And then we'll finish off the session today with talking about approaches to mixing. So is there more than one way to mix? We'll answer that question later. Okay, so now I want this to be, it's obviously a little bit weird because I'm talking to a green dot, but I know you're all out there and I'd really like that you interact with me where possible. So I've posed a few questions that I want you to answer in the chat, and I'll check in on them and like bring them back into the conversation. And also some of you, if you're shy and you don't want to comment in the chat, you can also just ask the questions yourself. I'd always encourage you to write down your answers because then you know what you think rather than changing your mind. But anyway, questions. So in a minute, hang on, where's my first question? Oh yeah, here it is. It was already there. Okay, what's the first question? So, what is the first thing that you do when you start a mix? Okay, so I'm going to pause on that for a little minute and check in with the chat and see what we've got. Organized tracks, Hyperion says organized tracks, check recording levels, phase issues. Okay, that's the first thing you do when you start? Etienne, hey, what's up, Etienne? Organizing track by instrument name, colors, and groups. Yeah, nice one. Cool. Okay, like it. Okay, so you guys listen. Yes, Alex, good one. Listen, I love it. That's really, really great. So absolutely, we've got some people, you know what you're doing. So let's go through it. So basically, we set it up in terms of the psychology and the approach to stuff. So let's start in with the setup. Oh, no, we're not. We're going to start in with the psychology. So the psychology of mixing. The question is, well, what am I talking when I say that? Basically, it's about knowing what you want to do and what you want to achieve. The second thing is considering the material and evaluating it. And then the third thing is considering the way that you want to approach that. So then, okay, cool. So why do I need to be talking about this to you? Why have I decided that this is important? And I think a lot of people, and particularly people when they first start mixing, they just go directly into audio processing. They might organize things a little bit, the organization part, but as Alex, I think, said, he listened first. And I think listening and getting a sense of what's going on is really important before you dive in, because it will inform, if you know your approach to it, it will inform your mix. And bigger than that, it also helps you to not mix generically, which is what we ultimately want to be doing. Okay, so I think that's pretty important. Okay, so another question for you. I won't check in. I'll just let you answer it, but please do. How is mixing different from producing? So let's go to some pretty pictures. So another way to say it is, what are the different stages and jobs in the life of a project? So being able to delineate the difference, what you're doing when you're songwriting, what you're doing when you're producing, what you're doing when you're mixing is really key to making sure that you're doing everything effectively at the right time and place. Now, I have a lot of people say to me, actually, hang on a sec. I'm just going to change the screen that I have. I'm going to make this a bit bigger. How's that? Someone was saying the screen's too small. Just change that. Cool. And I come back and I can see some questions here, which is cool. Surge Core says, I'll put this up for everyone. I ask myself, what will the artist want to show in the track and what should be showcased? And then I'll make a little list of what should be emphasized and what vibe they're going for. Surge Core, awesome. That's really good. So it's thinking about what is the intention of the track, what's the intention of the artist. And I also think that sometimes it's about listening to the sounds and you can get a sense for, what is because the song itself kind of often tells you what it wants to do, doesn't it? Even more than the people sometimes. Cool. Okay, I've got another one here from Scott. This is cool. So when we're talking about the question of what's the difference between mixing and production, Scott says, producing to me is more arrangement based and mixing is making sure every instrument works well together, creative choices in sound and what not. Okay, and what not. Yeah, that's cool. I think that you're on the right kind of path. Something I want to delineate there is that producing is about creative choices in sound as well. And this is where we have trouble with when producers don't understand different kind of approach to audio processing when they're mixing. So let me give you an example. Okay, so a lot of people don't understand the difference in using chorus as a production effect to change the sound, and chorus and a mixing effect when you shouldn't hear it because you don't want to change the character of the sound, but you're using the chorus to push the sound slightly back in the depth field so that you can get placement of various lead instruments, for example. Okay, so that's a difference between mixing and production, that is both creative choices about sound. So yeah. Okay, now I'm going to go back to my slides. Let's see where we're at. So just finalizing where we were, this is a kind of table. You don't need to take it all in, but this is just an example for me about understanding what are the different stages and jobs. So this, again, if for those of you that are, working, doing all of these things, I find this to be quite helpful because I know, like, what's the most important thing I should be focusing on now? For example, again, if I'm in the production phase and I spend an hour and a half trying to get the compression right on a kick drum, no, it's waste. I'm not doing that. I'm not mixing now. So I should be making sure the arrangement is right and that the sounds are good and, the layers and all that kind of stuff. And then if I've done all that, then I'm like, cool, it's mixing time. And I put on a different hat and I approach everything in a different way. So it makes sure that we kind of don't miss anything, I guess, and making sure that the songs are as good as they can be. So yeah, the final thing there, sound design and arrangement, character and mood for production, and mix decisions, optimizing sounds, placing sounds in relation to each other around the virtual mix space, and I'm going to say maximum impact, minimum voltage. Some people will have heard that before. So what are the tools that we use as a mix engineer? I'm not going to pause on that one because it's pretty obvious. We know what they are. Compression, EQ, faders, tape, meters, reverbs, chorus, etc., all that kind of stuff. The interesting question for me then becomes, how do we use them? So I've already kind of touched on this, and this, again, this is a table that you don't need to take in. It's more there as a kind of a reminder for me. But as I've already said this, when we're thinking about mixing, we don't just approach audio processing in one way. So I'll give you an example. Often people say, what does a compressor do? What do you use a compressor for, right? And then someone generally says, maybe someone's already answered it, controlling the dynamics. And that's true, but it's not the only thing we can use a compressor for. And if you see here, I have dynamic control, timbral effect, movement effects, and glue. Okay, so we'll look at that next week. We're going to get into that and seeing the different ways that you can work with a compressor. Okay, so thinking about all the different ways that we can approach and use the tools. And down the bottom there, again, big ups to Alex, ears is probably the most important tool that we have. Okay, I'm just going to do a quick check to see where we're at. Any more comments? No, cool. All right, let's go back to it. Okay, so next part is for us to think about, we've kind of got a sense of what the difference between mixing and production is, thinking about how we're going to approach and be thinking about the mix before we get into it. And this is really important because if you start without getting your head together, you're probably not going to make good decisions. So then we've done all that, then, okay, how do we actually start the mix is the next question. So some of you have already kind of said it when I said, what's the first thing you do when you mix? But what would if you were to summarize your mix process, what would it be? I'm going to show you mine in a second. If you do a quick Google search, everyone has their simple mixing tips, 10 steps to a perfect mix, mixing music 101. Okay, so there's lots of people have a kind of throwing their ideas at us all the time. And I'm about to throw you my ideas. However, I want to be clear that the idea, and any time when I do any kind of talking or education or webinars, this is a conversation, right? So I'm here to show you how I do it, and it's for you to reflect upon and think, cool, yeah, that's kind of like how I do it, or, oh God, I don't really do that, or no, I do it really differently, but I like my way. You do it. You do what you do you, basically. But I think it's really interesting to think about it. So here we go. Here's mine. First of all, I set it up, and that includes, what does that include? Naming, ordering, coloring. I often do my grouping at the same time, and I'm going to show you that in a second. Then I do gain staging, and it's super, super important. Now, be honest, who doesn't gain stage? I'll ask you that question in a minute. Then I do framing and discovery, and I guess these kind of things can happen at a similar time. So framing and discovery, what is that? Listening to the track, and particularly if it's a mix that I've never heard before, I'm getting the stems and I'm looking at them and saying, what's the quality of the audio? Are there any clicks? Is there, distortion problems? Is there weird phase? Is there weird, particularly Ableton mixes? They all get sent to me as all stereo files and I have to make them mono. So there's all that kind of stuff that we also need to do in framing and discovery as well. Figuring out what you've got and how you need to approach it. Then routing, of course, very important. And then after I've done all that, the kind of setup, then I really get into the kind of fun, creative, intuitive aspect of it, which is audio processing. So I call it get the energy right, which is focusing on EQ and compression. And I'm talking more here about energy in terms of voltage or amplitude or dynamics, and then also frequency. So it's about balancing the sounds in these kinds of spatial and auditory fields, first of all. Then once I've got it all working and everything cleaned up and sounding great together, then I get into the kind of what I call make it expensive, which is adding reverbs and delays and dimension and all that kind of stuff. Now, people, again, often start adding reverbs and plates and stuff immediately before they've figured out the EQ and compression. That's a road to a sloppy mix, I think. So I would be really careful about that. And then after I've done that, that's the main bulk of the mix. Then I starts to kind of, the spiral gets quite tight. So I'm going to focus on problems. So there'll be bass management is often something I need to look at to check that it's good, check the mono balance. It's not just problems I'll focus on. I might focus on, the most important things in the mix, like the vocals, and make sure the lead vocal sits throughout the mix. Then I do a thing that I call finesse the narrative, where I listen from the beginning to the end, and I make sure that the energy and the story is being told in the right way, so that it's building and the tension is building in the right way and the impact hits in the right way. The first chorus doesn't hit louder than the second chorus and all that kind of stuff. This is when I'll be doing automations and things like that with my hands and the faders. At that point, I'm feeling pretty good, and then I bounce my mixes. Okay, so that's my process. We're going to be talking about that over the next 3 weeks. So now I've divided these into 4 stages, and this is good for me because it kind of happens intuitively, but this is the point for me to take breaks and rest. So, and this might seem like a silly thing to talk about, but if you want to do this for a living, it's super important. So for one reason is that you get tired and it's, exhausting. But more than that, you can damage your ears quite seriously. And even more important, if you don't care about your health, you care about doing a good job probably. And you often, after a couple of hours, you get ear fatigue and you don't hear as well. So it's important to take a break. So for me, I take a break at the end of each of these stages, and it works for me to kind of come back in and do, focus where I need to be. That generally for me, my mixes take between like 4 and 12 hours, I guess, but on average about 6 to 8 hours. So it's like a day, generally speaking. Cool. Okay, so stage 1, setup, gain stage, routing, and discovery. So let's have a look at the setup of the mix. I'll show you my mix. Yeah, Anna's saying, please don't be shy. Let us know your questions. So even if I don't, I'll just say that, even if I don't answer the questions, I'll just take Scott's question off there. Even if I don't answer them straight away, please send in your questions as soon as you have them, and Anna is going to collect them all, and then we can answer them at the end, or whenever I take breaks like now, where I'm checking the questions and making sure that it's okay, that everything's working. Cool. All right. So where were we? Right, back at it. Here's my track. Give you a bit of a listening. Cool. Okay, so you get a sense of the track. It's a kind of a slow groove, soul funk kind of vibe, and it doesn't sound great at the moment. It's because it hasn't been mixed or gain staged. Okay, so it's pretty kind of flat. We haven't put our magic into it. So first of all, we want to kind of check out the organization, and you can see I've colored it. I don't need to go through this. This kind of stuff is pretty obvious, right? So it's just the important thing is that you do it and that's organized and named properly. And if I go into the other section, I have already set up my groups as well. So if I want to, I've got all my drums, or I can take the drums off and I have the different drum groups organized, my overheads, things like that. Oh, do I not? Oh, I do have overheads. Okay, so things like that. Again, if working professionally, these kinds of decisions are important, right? To get organized, like in the beginning, so that you have a good workflow. Another thing that I should say to you all, the students, is that particularly this session today is really important because your first jobs often will be as an assistant to a producer or a mix engineer. And what I'm talking about today is probably going to be your first professional job if you're lucky enough to get an opportunity to work as an assistant or work in a studio. So this often, depending on like the budget for my mix jobs, but this will be the stuff that I will get an assistant to set up and prepare for me. Okay, so it's important for lots of reasons. Okay, so the organization, I have it grouped, I have it colored and set up. I haven't got my routing organized yet because I wanted to show you through that. But for me, I would probably tend to do my routing at the same time as I'm doing all this kind of setup because, well, I would, but I'm going to keep it separate for all of us. Okay, so let's talk about gain staging. We'll keep it rolling. Gain staging. Okay, now question time for you all. Let's go I'm going to go straight into gain staging. And tell me, what is it? What is gain staging, everyone? What is it? And also answer me, what is it and who does it? Be honest. Do you do it or do you not do it? Let's hear it. Let's hear what you have to say. I'm just going to wait for a little minute. Maybe I'll put some music on in the meantime. Let's see. Okay. So gain staging, whilst I wait for the questions. Yes, so Hyperion says, does Pro Tools have pre-fader metering? Yes, it does. You can change it. Okay, so I'm going to talk about gain staging for a little bit. It is maintaining optimal levels, and we'll talk about unity. So understanding what unity is and understanding what is an optimal level. That's another question that I think you should be kind of asking yourselves, particularly if you're working in Ableton. I think that the visualization of the faders is different, and also the way that let's say the plugins and everything are set up is that it's set up that it's really loud. So it's often too loud for when you're going to be mixing. So okay, so I've got a few answers here. Someone says gain staging is setting the levels to minus 18 dB. That's Ni-Ray. Cool. I always like when people say this to me, because then my next question is minus 18 dB what? Minus 18 dB peak or RMS? That's really important. So I'm not going to go too deep into that today, but I'll let you think about it. So Chivak, I'm sorry if I don't pronounce your name correctly, but you are saying you do it and it's up to set up the proper gain expectancy of the door to have enough headroom. Yeah. So the gain expectancy of the door, it's not really the door, it's like audio for any kind of program, any kind of so no one is saying dBFS, yes, full scale, but then is it peak or RMS? Because you've got dBFS RMS, dBFS peak, and we want to know about both of them. Okay, I'm going to go back to my slides for a little bit because I'm getting distracted with all of your questions. Okay, so what is gain staging? This is management of levels through the signal chain, is what Horton's got to say about it. So actually gain staging, you consistently gain stage throughout the mixing process. We're always keeping an eye on the levels and the balance of it. But if we talk about gain staging traditionally, it's the specifically the process of gain staging where it's the initial setup and calibration of the audio levels. Okay, so that's what I'm going to, in a second, I'm going to walk you through my kind of gain stage processing. Meters, right? We started this by kind of questioning metering. Now, today isn't a metering talk. It's an important aspect of understanding being an engineer and a mix engineer. Enough to say that I'll just give you the answer. So when we're mixing, we care more about RMS, which is also visually represented with a VU meter, which has a similar kind of response, visual response to an RMS, which displays an average loudness. And why do we care about average loudness? Because that relates more to the way humans perceive loudness, the way we hear sound. And when we're mixing for people to hear it, so it sounds good, we care about the average levels and things. Okay, so why do we have peak meters then? Why do we even need them? Well, I kind of explain it in the way by saying that that's how machines hear, if you will. So if there's a peak that gets to the maximum point of the machine, let's say, it will clip or it will distort, and we have to decide if we like the distortion or not. So analog distortion, yay; digital distortion, ew. Right, so we need to be really aware of the meters and what part we're listening to, and if it's working for us or not. Okay, cool. So yes. So let's do a gain stage demonstration. Enough talking, let's get into it. All right. Cool. So have I got I might just take myself out for a minute and let's check it out. Okay, so here's my track again. You'll notice before I start, I want to show you that I've got the master fader is turned down, and that is a massive no. The reason that I have it turned down is because I'm doing a webinar, and if I have it turned up really loud when it's not gain staged, it's going to be really loud for all of you and sound terrible. Okay, so I will turn up in time. Another thing that's a big no-no that you might notice is that I have a limiter on the master. When you're mixing, no limiters, please. Turn it off. You can turn the limiter on after you mix when you want to send it to the client or whatever, to turn the loudness up. That's fine, but please don't mix into a limiter. Not the vibe. Okay, so that I only have that on again for safety in case something goes crazy, so that you don't damage your ears. Okay, so let's check it out. The other, talking about metering, I use a VU meter, and this helps me to calibrate my levels. So I'm going to start off with, I'm just going to go for my live drums. I'll just loop this. Now, my VU meter is not very helpful to me because I've got the volume turned down. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. The sub is, sorry, I shouldn't have been talking when the music is on. I don't need the VU meter because I have the volume turned down at the moment. So I'm just going to go based on what I can hear and see. So I think that I'm going to leave the sub, but I'm going to use a trim tool, and I'm going to take everything down about 6 dB. Now, there's obviously another way you can do this, is you can change the clips. So I'll show you that as well. So if you wanted to, you can do clip gain automation by shift function control dash, and then you get this level, and you can do that. It's kind of similar to Ableton, but I'm old school, so I don't do that. So I am going to go back into my other window, and I'm going to use the trim tool. So I'm going to do about 6 dB. So I hear Scott says thought on templates. I like that one. I'm going to pause on that for a sec. So yeah, I think this is a really interesting question. Maybe we talk about it a bit more at the end, but I think that I don't like templates personally, because creating the mix, the setup, and deciding my routing flow and things like that, that's a part of my creative process. Maybe if I was mixing, as at the level of someone like Michael Brow or Sheps, with so many, the way that they have the routing and the parallel buses and stuff like that, if he has a particular way that he approaches his mix, which is his signature, sure, that's important. Use a template, that's his vibe. I mean, whatever. But for me, maybe I'm still finding my signature, but I think it's an interesting question. I don't use them. I don't like them, but other people love to use a template. So I think it's a totally personal decision there. Yeah. I'd be interested. Other people can dive in. Who uses templates and likes them? Let's keep the conversation going whilst I gain stage. Okay. So I'll get back to the gain staging, take off Scott's template question. All right, so where was I? So I'm going to down about 6 dB, and then I'm going to, hang on, I feel like I might have lost, oh no, cool. Thought I lost the stream there for a second. Okay, we're good. All right, so yeah, so I'm going to bring everything down. I'll come back to the discussion on templates in a second whilst I get this done. So all of these I'm going to take down about 10 dB, and then as I listen, my overheads, I mean, that's fine. Cool, I'm happy with that. And I'm going to add in got these shakers. They're super loud, so they're going to come down more to me. Oh, that one's really loud. Okay, by 6 dB. Okay, so this is just, I can just hear it. Let me take this to 0 now. And perhaps I'll turn down the limiter a bit more, just so it doesn't get too loud and you can hear what. Okay. So what I'm wanting to do is when I'm setting up my mix, my gain stage, sorry, I want my, I kind of want my drums and bass and this is this is my way of doing it, but with minus 18 dB RMS, I want my drums and bass to be hitting about 0. So I could tell, because I brought this down, that this is what I needed to do. Is maybe that's a bit of a convoluted way for saying it, but let's have a look here with if I just solo my kick, hang on. Okay, so the kicks, with just the kicks, is already at, it's already pretty loud. If I take the trim off, can see that there it's too loud, so I needed to bring it down. So I basically took a gamble, and I thought about between 4 and 6 dB, and it worked. So it's not a massive, you don't need to be too pedantic about the gain stage. It's kind of find the numbers and get the balance right, basically, is what I would say. Okay, so let's see where we go. Okay, I'll put these back on again. Cool. Add the shakers. Oops. Cool. That's feeling pretty good. Add my bass. Okay, so my bass obviously needs to come down as well. Now at this point, I want to see my view. Okay, now also I think that when this is compressed, it's going to be more kind of focus the bass sound, so I'm not too worried that it's slightly quiet in relation to some of the louder ambient sounds, because I'm also going to bring those down. Okay, let's keep moving. Okay, so they're really loud. Okay, so these all need to come down. Again, I'm just going for the 6, and I'm then, if it doesn't work, then I'm going to go back and make adjustments. Again, because I don't want this to take hours, because it's, you know, it's just it's not the fun bit of the gig, is it? Okay, let's check it out. Summer grass shrink falling, hearts on sleeves, I'm bailing. Okay, so too loud, still too loud. So actually, should still bring that down. Okay, I haven't gain staged my vocals yet though. Sec. So what I'm looking for here, just because I'm being lazy, I'm looking for a mono trim plugin that I can drag directly across. Let's see. Cool. Sorry, this is a little bit boring. We're almost there. Okay, let's see. Okay, so these keyboards are pretty loud. They need to come down. So I'm going to bring them down quite a lot. Cool. Then the other thing that I didn't share with you is that I set my drums and bass to -18, and then I set my mix to -16. And then it just helps me to set the balance of the bass percussion area, and then I still have some headroom for my vocals when I go to the next one. Okay, let's check it out. Cool. Okay, so now my mix is going to stay. Beautiful. Okay, now let me just check in. So I know that was okay, so I've got a few questions there. So okay, there's my gain stage. So you can see basically what I'm doing is I now again, I'm taking a stab at where I think I should bring it down, you know, 4 dB or something like that. If you turn it on and it's really in the red, then you know you need to bring it down quite a lot. If it's just kind of pushing over the 0 point on the VU, then you just need to bring things down 1 dB. So I knew I needed to do some pretty significant gain staging there. So I just did that. So now my guide for that would be, like, as I said, don't like spend hours doing it all perfectly. No, just go pick a number that works, put it across all of them, then listen to if there's tracks that are sticking out that need to come down further, which is what I did, because the all of the keyboards were still way too loud. So I brought those down. I think it was 10 dB at the end. Okay, and then have another listen, and then now we're ready to go. So I feel happy, things are balanced, and I'm ready to go to the next stage. All right, let's check in on where we're at with the keynote. There's actually one more thing that I didn't do there. So obviously I've done the gain staging, but things are still sounding pretty whatever. So I haven't even touched the faders. So now at this point, I do a quick little balance, get a sense of the balance. I'll just start this again, and I'll do that quickly. So So I want this to be less roomy. So I'm going to bring down the room sounds, and the trash mic sound, and also the toms. I'm not sure about them. I'm just going to leave that for the minute. Now those vocals need to come up. Cool. Okay, so now when I've done this, there's a few little adjustments, and then I'm still working within my. As I start to make these changes, I turned down some of the keyboards, and then I turned up the vocal, and it still is hitting that kind of that level that's working. All right. Now going into next section, which is to talk about routing. So this is a kind of continuation on, was it Adam was saying before about templates. So if you have really complicated routing arrangements with parallel buses and things like the Browerizing or Andrew Sheps in particular, those two have really complicated mix setups. Sure, mixed templates, I get that. As I said, for me, it's not really my vibe. Also, something I would just say, it's also a process for me to get my head into the game of what's happening, and I want to understand where I'm sending things, because as I'll show you in a minute, the way that you process the audio is going to impact where where the sounds are coming from. So I like to do it myself. So one of the things here is, so I want to know, do I want to have the individual ability to process the signals, or do I want multiple signals or tracks to actually be treated as one kind of event? So that's an important thing to think about. And also parallel processing. So what parallel processes do I want? I like to use the 3-2 rule, which is like I tend to have 3 reverbs and 2 delays. Sometimes that changes for sure, but I like it because it keeps things clean, and I have a kind of concept, a spatial concept. I'm going to talk about that more next week. But yeah, so my parallel processes. And then the final thing is subgroups and mix bus. So how do I want to arrange that? So I've done the template question. So let's have a little demonstration of the routing. All right. Now routing is a moment where I think Ableton is a little bit frustrating. I think most other programs work in a similar way to Pro Tools. There's something that I like about Pro Tools over the other programs is that Pro Tools, I mean, it's kind of annoying as well. Pro Tools doesn't do anything for you. You have to do it all yourself. But as a mix engineer, when your routing is part of your creative process, then you kind of don't want it to do things for you. Like Logic, for example, great program, but in the thing that's so great about it is that you can get up and be making music really, really quickly. But if you don't mix it, if you're not careful about the way you mix in Logic, Logic will start making a lot of decisions for you. Like it automatically chooses reverbs and does the routing and decides on pre-fader, post-fader, and all this kind of stuff. So Pro Tools, anything that happens, you did it yourself. So I think it's really good for that. Okay, so let's get back to it. So I'm going to go through how I'm going to organize this routing a little bit. Hang on, let me check in and see if there's any questions. Folder tracks in Pro Tools. I don't use them. I guess I'm old school, so I'd love to be enlightened about the folder tracks. Maybe we can get some more info about that. But it's a relatively new feature. It's come from how all the programs look at each other, and it's something from Logic that Pro Tools has adopted. But I mean, yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't actually use it, but sure. I'm kind of, because Pro Tools, I do a lot of analog mixing. So things like folder tracks, you can't do that analog, and I kind of like it, but whatever. Anyway, so this is my approach. Some people use VCA masters as well. I don't do that, but that's also totally legitimate. So, okay, Now, my kicks, I want to be able to process them individually, but then I also want to be able to compress them all at the end, actually, to bring them together. So I want those to be a subgroup. So I'm going to create new track, stereo auxiliary, kick. Cool. Okay, so there's that one. That's great. And then I'm going to now create another, hang on, I'll do these. Then I have snares, top and bottom, and I have rims, and I want those to all go to their own subgroup as well. Snares, I'll call that. Right. Then I have just the rest of my tracks of my drums. Okay, so I'm going to select all of these, and then I'm going to create a subgroup. I want all of my drums to then go to, oh, hang on, that. Yep. No, not that. This and that, and not those. Okay, so I want those to go to a subgroup that I'm going to create and call drums. Might actually make it drums and bass in the end. Now, and this one, this is just my organization. I like to bring these to the end. Again, I'm an analog person, so I would have my subgroups. They'd be on the right-hand side generally of the, yep. Okay, what's next? So my shakers, I'm going to put those just into the drums as well. Sometimes if I have lots of percussion, I'd put them to something else. Now the bass is sitting there by itself. I think for this track, sometimes I would do this differently, but the low end is working together. So I'm going to put this actually in with my drums as well. And I might change the name of that to call it DMB, drums and bass. Hang on. Cool, drums and bass. And then it's as simple as one. So it's pretty basic, actually. The routing for this track is simple. Keys, synth. And then again, so another question here, I will probably do, I'm going to do a subgroup for my backing vocals. And the lead vocal is also part of the backing. No, I'm going to keep them separate. And that's an ad lib. So I'll try for now to put all of the backing vocals together, BVs, and then I'll have the leads going together. Now, the reason I separate the leads and the backing vocals is that because the lead vocals want to sit out on top, and when I'm mixing, if I mix in the chorus lead vocals with the backing vocals, they can get lost. And so that is the reason to separate them in this way. New track and call it lead box. Cool. Okay. Whoa, sorry. Okay, now let's bring these all over. Backing vocals. And my keyboards, where are they? Okay. Cool. So now when I solo these, I'm not hearing anything, and that's because I've mixed something quite important, which is that you need to do safe solo mode. Hang on, hang on a second. Other way around, safe solo mode here is better practice. And hopefully you understand what I'm talking about. Maybe you don't. I can explain this further if you don't understand. Okay, so now that what I can do, I can obviously mute the things I don't want to listen to. So I'll just loop this again. Got my drums. Got my keys, vocals, the lead vocal and backing vocal. Cool. Okay. And that's the routing, and that's the organization of it. So that is a typical way that I approach my routing, and it is one of the standard kind of ways. So I think some people, I do kind of tend to group my percussion, the different kicks. I want to then control them with compression, and that's not something that everyone does. So that's a little bit different, but that's the way I approach it. Okay, so where are we? Let's check in. Are you all out there? Are you still there with me? Cool. Okay, hang on. So let's see where we're at. So we're kind of coming to the end of the session. I think I might like to pause there for a sec and check out some of these questions. So Knockine, I'm just coming back. Knockine, hey Knockine, how are you? She asks, do you have any recommendation? I'll put this up. Let me go back to the comments. Oh, I can't find it. Where is it? Sorry, here. Okay, back here, Knockine. So Knockine says, hey, do you have any recommendation in the order to set up the tracks and they get confusing because you've been ordering them differently every time? Yes, this is definitely, hang on, I'm just getting confused. Let me focus again. This is a really good thing that you put forward, and it doesn't really matter how you set up your tracks. What does matter is that you stick to it. You do the same thing every time. So I've been mixing for like, I don't know, 20 years or something now. And I'm really, really pedantic and particular about the way I set my tracks up. Okay. My drums have to be at the bottom, or at the top rather. And I think of this as a kind of inverted mixing desk. So if it were analog, my kick drum would be on the track 1. And I build it up that way. And I have my vocals, the lead is always on the right. And then after that, I'll have my parallel things and my subgroups. Like I have to have it this way. I have to have yellow vocals. I have to have blue drums, like, because I've done it so often. If I were to change that, I'd see yellow and I'd think it was a vocal, and then I get confused, as you've been confused. So just to reiterate, it really doesn't matter what you do, but you just need, maybe if you don't know, do what I do. Just, it doesn't really matter. Find something, stick to it, do it, and then make it a habit, and just don't question it. Because I think that if you spend time messing around with this, what we're talking about today, too much, you kind of are wasting time. This is not the like super enjoyable part of mixing. This is the kind of really important, but it's like repetitive. So it's like, figure it out, do it the same, be methodical, so that when you get to the mix, when you're in the EQ and compression and you're figuring out reverbs and you're having fun with sound, you don't get distracted by getting confused or by, I don't know, sounds not being gain staged properly or whatever it might be, that breaks you from that really important thing, which is the flow state that you want to get yourself in so that you can be making enlightened mixed choices, right? So yeah, thanks for that question, Knockine. All right, let's check it out. What else have we got? Got really great chats here, guys. Nice one, really cool stuff. Nice. Okay, we need to probably talk a little bit more about metering and levels. I'm not going to do it today, but I think we'll do it in the next session. I hope you will all join me in that next section, because lots of you are saying peak, 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 and that is wrong, my friend. We want RMS when we're thinking about mixing. Okay, so going back to the question about templates. So Hyperion saying Hyperion likes to start from scratch every time. It's a bit more work, but I'd rather not be guided by anything in artistic choices. I'm with you all the way, man. It's good. And as you say, the more jobs you get, maybe you change your mind. Okay, Austra. No hating here. Just love. Mixing with Ableton. Yes, I mix in Ableton sometimes, but I've got to say that this is a personal thing, but I do be talking with other professionals, whatever. Working with different DAWs is that they have the way that they're set up impacts your psyche in a different way. So you know, Pro Tools is amazing for tracking, for recording, and for mixing, and for audio editing. It's amazing. It's not so good as a MIDI sequencer. It's terrible, in fact. And in terms of sound design, it's not as fast. Whereas Ableton is super, super fast at sound design. It's amazing, intuitive, and responsive, but it doesn't have, it's, at least for me, the way that it's organized. Particularly the inability for the routing situation doesn't work very well. And I also don't like, one of my pet hates in Ableton is that if you pre-fader one send, it does it to the whole line. That's just annoying to me. And it is a really counterintuitive thing if I'm trying to get sounds in one space at different levels of depth perception. I will be playing with pre-fader metering. So yes, and also the other thing, the final thing to say is that Ableton, you like dance music. So I mix and I do remixes in Ableton. Absolutely. Would I mix jazz in Ableton? Absolutely not. But, one of my favorite bands, Tame Impala, mixed their whole album in Ableton, I found out. And I was like, oh my God. But the moral of that anecdote is that who cares? Like, you do you. If you like Ableton, go for it. What I'm talking about today, gain staging and setup, and what I will be talking about in the next weeks, it doesn't matter what you use. It's the process and it's how you engage with it that I think is really important. Okay. So, yeah, hopefully that's answered that question. So, and also I'm just coming to the next question, which is from Barnaby. Hey, mate. Advantages and disadvantages of mixing in different DAWs. Hopefully I've kind of just covered that question for you as well. What else we got? Cool. Nice one. We've got some people giving their info about Ableton. Okay, another one here about routing from Alexander. Do you tend to focus on making your routing more efficient or flexible? It's an interesting question. I don't know if it's about efficient or flexible. It's about it's about the signal flowing in the way that it needs to. So for example, as I said, like I want my drums to be separate, my kick drums to be separate to mainly EQ. And then I want to compress them together to really kind of glue them and make sure that they work. Ultimately, that the contour of the envelope, let's say, of the sound, they're working kind of together. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's about. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'm answering that question properly, but I think it's about setting it up so that the signals are working and they're combining at the time that I want to combine them. Another example is what I just did before with. Let's see. I might just show you. Say hey again, as we're having a chat. So, for example, another example, right? In my, what am I doing? This one. Okay, so over here I decided to set up two different vocals, a lead vocal and a backing vocal, because I'm hearing in this track that I will be wanting to do an idea that I would use chorus or a kind of a subtle phase shifter to spread the backing vocals a bit wider so they kind of sit around the lead vocal. So I want them to be separate. But then I will likely, as this mix goes on, I would likely sum these two into a final vocal subgroup. And then I would probably process that vocal subgroup with some gentle mix bus compression as well, just to make sure that the vocal is sitting up above the instruments a little bit. So yeah, that's hopefully that's answering that question. Cool. Let's go on. Ollie, what's up? Hey, Ollie. Wondered what your opinion is on a top-down mixing approach. More and more engineers seem to be doing this. Do you think it makes learning more difficult? This is a perfect moment to segue. I'm just, we're gonna pause on that because this discussion is going to close out today's webinar. So I just saw one other question here that I'm going to answer first, and then Ollie, we're coming back to your question. So do you gain stage after EQ, like with the output gain of the EQ? Great question. So the question is, when you apply EQ, that's going to change the level. Do you then turn up or down the output? I guess that's what you're saying, right? So sometimes is my answer to this. Now, to some people who don't understand what this is, basically it's called maintaining unity. So it's probably easier to explain in relation to compression. And I will talk about this a lot next week. So if people don't understand this, tune in next week and we'll talk about it a lot more. So I'll explain it with compression. You come into a compressor, you compress it, so therefore you reduce the dynamic range, and then compressors have a makeup gain or they have an output, right? So hang on, I'll just go a bit bigger. Okay, so basically with like an analog compressor, you have to adjust the gain yourself, and that is when you adjust it to make sure when you bypass it, turn it on or off, that it's at the same level that it came in. Indoors, and particularly in Logic, I'd say it's one of my pet hates with Logic, is that the presets, it has an auto makeup feature, and the auto makeup feature doesn't equal back the unity. It makes it louder. And my suspicion is that software developers do this because, particularly something like Logic, because it's entry-level consumer marketed now, it's to make it seem exciting. Something seems louder, we're like, whoa, I'm awesome, I've done amazing compression. But maybe not. Okay, so I oftentimes, when I'm working with students, I'll look into their project and they'll have a compressor on, and I look in the compressor and there's no gain reduction. It's just basically turning the sound up. So be careful about that. So maintaining unity on your compressor is important, yes. So then coming back to the question, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your name. I'm terrible. I'm an uncultured Australian. Kivant? Anyway, yes, sorry in advance. So you say, do you gain stage after EQ? Sometimes. So sometimes I'm using the EQ because I want the sound to cut through the mix more, in which case, no, I don't. So I think it can be kind of a case-by-case situation. Cool. Okay, so now let's go. We're going to come back to our final question here by Ollie. I'm going to readjust, go back to the keynote for our final section. Now we're going to go a little bit over 7, but because I've been doing the questions as we go, I hope that this is still interesting for you. Let's just get to the final bit. Okay, I'm not going to talk about discovery and framing too much. I just want to go over it briefly, just to make sure that everyone's kind of understanding the concept. So it's really a fancy way of saying listening, making judgment calls on what you hear. That then is going to inform the way that you proceed with the mix. And it's super important, of course. So I'm looking for problems. So I want to know about badly recorded sounds like cars in the background or whatever, clicks, distortions, it's too quiet, maybe the signal is inconsistent. Like often I'll get with vocalists that people have recorded it themselves at home. They've recorded at different levels. There also might be thing where some takes are like this and other takes are like this. So they've got different relationship to the polar pattern, and that's actually really hard to fix in the mix. Overly processed, that's another one. I get stuff that's been absolutely slammed, and that's unfortunately it's really hard to work with something once it's been killed. In that case, if I had that, or if you have this, I would go back to the producer or the songwriter and say, hey, could you just turn off all the compression and send it back to me? No problem. I do that all the time. The other thing is poor performance. Often there's tuning issues. There might be tone problems, particularly in vocals, and often basses that haven't been serviced. The intonation up the top is off. The rhythm problems with playing, or general kind of energy. So these things should have been fixed in production, but often they're not. And so it's my job I'm the last line, right? So we've got to get it right. So those are the things that we want to fix. Also, arrangement issues. Quite often there are problems in the arrangement. The last chance to get it right is in the mix. So you can do certain things. You can mute stuff. You can use an octave up, octave down to change the bass, the placement of sounds in the frequency spectrum. Anyway, we can look at some of that stuff next week. But then it's not just about problems, it's also about you getting excited, listening to the song and being like, oh, what are the good things about this track? What's the best part of the song that you're really excited when it comes, you know? Is there a killer performance? Is there a beautiful melody moment that just makes you melt? So those initial feelings and reactions are super important for you to clock and remember. And I write them down, because after you've been mixing this track for 8 hours, you might not be as excited as you were, you know, at the beginning of the day. So I think it's important to remember that. And if you're not excited, it means take a break, go outside, come back in, get the vibe, and make sure that you get it to a point that you feel excited again. Okay. So discovery and framing, that's the vibe with that. I'll just check in any questions. Always bashing bass players. Hey, Matt, I'm a bass player, so, you know, no shade. All right, cool. So let's go to the final bit, which is approaches to a mix. So is there more than one way to approach a mix, which was, I think, a question I threw out to you at the beginning of the session. And we've already alluded to the fact that, yeah, of course there is. There's definitely more than one way. So was it Scott? Sorry if I can't remember your name. Said talk about top down. So to my understanding, these are the 4 different ways that you can approach a mix. Number 1, bottom up. Okay, so you start with kick drum, get it right, get the balance of the bass and the foundational elements, and then you move through the tracks one by one. Or top down, where you start from the top and then you get the top in terms of frequency, right? We're thinking. So this will likely be the vocals, and then you're going to work from the vocals through the instruments and then down into the rhythm section. Then there's another approach, which is like foundation elements first or mono instruments first, right? And what I mean by that is the instruments that are sitting in center in your mix. There shouldn't be many of them. If there are, that's the first thing you need to look at when you're mixing. So for me, the things that are down the center and don't have any movement is my kick drum, my snare drum, my bass, and my lead vocal. That's it. Everything else is somewhere else in the stereo field. So often, then I call those the foundation instruments. So I often start with those 4 sounds, get them really good, and then I start to build up around it. Then the final way is to say, let the sounds guide you. Now, this I've got to say is advanced mixing, and I would suggest very heavily that you don't do this yet. This is something that Bob Clearmountain approaches his mixes in this way. So when you get to a stage when you've been mixing for like, I don't know, 10 years or something, or whenever you get to a place where you trust yourself, you really feel you back yourself and you're confident that you can hear everything, you definitely need to be in a room that is treated, and you definitely need to have good quality monitors for you to let the sounds guide you. Otherwise, you don't really know what you're hearing, right? So these are the 4 ways to approach it. Now, coming back to question of, hang on, let me just get into that question again. Where are we? So does it make learning more difficult? Now, I would say, I think the easiest way, if you've got a rhythm, you've got a kind of standard track like I've shown you today, is to start with the foundation, start down low, and go through it. Once you've done some mixes like this, I think that a top-down approach is really, it's appropriate. It depends on the genre, right? So this is kind of like the next question. I actually think I have this in my next question. Next slide, rather. So yeah, here we go. Okay, I've already thought about your question. Okay, so what impacts the way that you're going to approach the mix? Now, the genre, what the mix is for, i.e., dance floor, headphone, television, iPhone, whatever, television. Who watches television anymore? Anyway, you get what I'm saying. Um, how are you mixing? Are you mixing in the box or analog? And also, what is the instrumentation that you've got with you? Okay. So now let me articulate that a little bit further. If you are doing a choir piece, it's mainly choir. How are you going to start? Where will you start? Well, start with the lead melody, I guess. They're all kind of the same. If you're doing a standard, track that has drums, bass, keyboards, guitars, vocal, right? Let's assume that that's kind of what we're talking about at the moment. So then the question becomes, what genre is it? If it's like funk and if the rhythm section is really important, like in my track, I'm starting with the rhythm section because the groove is fundamental to the success of the mix. If it's a pop track, though, it's all about the vocal. So I would start with the vocal. And to answer the question in a really, really long way is when it's appropriate to do top down mixing. So if you're doing mixing that is for, I was going to say radio, but radio doesn't exist anymore either, really. Spotify or whatever, that kind of pop market, the key thing is the vocal. So get the vocal right, really focus on the vocal, and then you build the other elements around it. I'd encourage you, whilst you're learning, I encourage you to experiment with these things. I had a student a couple of years ago who did for his major project. He researched different approaches to mixing and things like that, and he did a portfolio where he mixed in a bunch of different ways, and he kind of compared the results, and it's really interesting. So maybe there's something for you, some of you there, to kind of experiment with. Cool. I'm just checking in on the questions. Okay. Now, I think that's it. I think we kind of got to the end of the line. Hope I've answered everyone's questions. I'm just going to take Ollie's question off. So now it's time for general questions. If anyone has anything else, that's all I had to say for today. I guess I'll say, hey, yep. Yeah, final call. If you have any more questions to send through, now's your chance. Also, I'd be happy for you to let me know the kinds of things that you want to talk about next week when we're going to do EQ and compression and like general audio processing, because there's a lot to that. So I want to think about how I can best kind of prepare that for you. Oh, cool. There's one question here from Jill. Hi, Jill. Okay, another question. Do you work with a reference when mixing? Usually I do. I found it helps me stay focused. Jill, thank you so much for asking this question. It's so important. It's so, so important. And I must have got flustered in the webinar and missed this slide because it's super important. Yes, I definitely mix with a reference. It's absolutely lots of references. So I will, so let me explain my approach to working with references. And I want to talk about it because I see so many students don't mix with references. And for two reasons, references are fundamentally important for students, right? One, the learning. You probably don't trust your ears yet. So you need to be comparing your work to something that is the benchmark that you want to get to. So you have to be comparing your work all the time to that goal. I want my mix to sound as good as that. Okay. Fundamental. Number two, I imagine that most of you are working out of your bedrooms. Maybe you have a studio room. What quality monitors are you using? Adams S range with this way? Or if not, like what monitors, or you need to, the room and the monitors is fundamental. So are you mixing in headphones? So if you are not in an environment that you trust 100%, which most of us are not, You know, even in my room, my studio, this is not set up yet for mixing. I'm going to be doing some adjustments to it over the next months to fix it up a little bit further. But, you know, it's really important. So there's that. And then the other side is the learning aspect. The third aspect, when you become a professional, when you go, yep, I trust my ears, I trust my ability, I've got a great room, then it becomes a question of making sure that you're working to the standard, that you're working to the expectations of the client, right? So the client's like, what sound do they want you to give them? So that's important. And you'll have discussions with the client about the vibe that they're going for and what they want to happen. Or if you're mixing it yourself, you'd obviously have some ideas. And then again, if you're mixing an album, you want to mix based on the other, you want to kind of check in on the other songs. So mix, yes. References are super important. So please all use them if you don't. I would also like to say one final thing. I'll talk about it next week. Reference, getting your mixes, your references set up so that it's really easy to A/B them, because that's the other thing, getting the levels right. Because if you don't set your reference up correctly, it's not going to be helpful for you when you're mixing. So we'll look at that next week. Great. And just checking if there's any more questions. Travis, thanks, mate. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Glad that was useful and helpful, and hope that you'll be coming back next week. Okay, so this is for next week. We can talk more about brow rising. Happy to. Well, we'll have to see how we go time-wise, but yeah, I'll definitely talk about it a bit. Etienne says, I feel like I do much better when I mix with a reference track and the demo. Defo, absolutely. Cool, we've got one from Travis. A77X is overkill from a bedroom studio. It depends, like the answer to that. I mean, I think that we're going to talk to you. I think Anna said he'd talk to you, but it depends how big your room is. A7Xs, yes, amazing. A77Xs also. I think, yeah, you can chat a little bit more with Anna afterwards. Okay, Rory, thanks, mate. Thank you. Okay, so I guess that's it. No more questions. We're going to finish up. So this has been webinar 1 from our 3-part webinar series, and I really hope to see you all next week for EQ compression. And yeah, thanks a lot. See you later.